Nearly 50 years ago, a young woman from the Creek Nation Township of Okemah, Oklahoma, was found at the bottom of a shallow ravine off a dirt road that most people in that county didn't even have a name for. She had been struck. She had been left. And the man who left her there had driven back through town, parked his truck, gone inside his house, and begun the long, quiet business of pretending he had nothing to do with it. He was good at it. He was so good at it that when investigators came around asking questions, and they did come around, within hours, because in a town of 4,000 people there are no strangers and almost no secrets, he answered them calmly. He expressed concern. He said he hoped they found whoever was responsible. He shook hands with the sheriff's deputy and walked back to whatever he had been doing before they knocked. For 49 years, that was enough. 49 years of ordinary life. Of harvest seasons and church suppers and grandchildren, and a community that had no reason to think of him as anything other than what he had always appeared to be. A man they had known since he was young, reliable, quiet, the kind of man you trusted with your keys or your cattle or your daughter's whereabouts on a Saturday night. The truth had been there the whole time, buried under decades of routine and silence, and the particular way that small communities sometimes protect the people they know at the expense of the people they've lost. What finally broke it open was a piece of evidence that had been sitting in an Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation storage facility since 1976. A biological sample collected at the scene, preserved in a paper envelope by a technician who had no idea that the technology to use it properly wouldn't exist for another 3 decades, and a forensic genealogist in Tulsa who got a name from that sample in the spring of 2023 that no one in Okemah had said out loud in connection with this case in almost half a century. But before we get to any of that, we have to go back to the summer of 1975. Because to understand what was lost on that dirt road, you first have to understand who Anna Mae Harjo was. The Oklahoma of 1975 was a state still finding its footing after the oil boom years had crested and begun their slow retreat. In the rural townships of Okfuskee County, the part of Oklahoma that sits in the heart of what had been Creek Nation territory before allotment and statehood carved it into something the federal government found easier to administer. The economy ran on cattle and oil leases, and the particular pride of communities that had survived things most people outside those counties had never been asked to survive. Okemah was a town of around 4,000. Its main street had a diner, a hardware store, a 5 and dime that was already struggling against the Walmart that had opened 40 miles south. On Friday nights in the fall, almost everyone turned out for the high school football games. On Sundays, the parking lots at the Baptist and Methodist churches filled up by 9:30. People left their back doors unlocked. They knew their neighbors' vehicles well enough to clock a stranger's pickup from 100 yards. It was the kind of place that felt safe, not because nothing bad had ever happened there, but because the community had decided, collectively and over many years, that looking out for each other was simply what you did. Anna Mae Harjo was 22 years old in the summer of 1975. She was the second of 4 children, born to Raymond and Clara Harjo, a Creek family who had farmed the same 40 acres outside of Okemah for 3 generations. Her father ran cattle. Her mother kept a kitchen garden and sold preserves at the county fair every August. Anna Mae had grown up in the same 2-bedroom house where her grandmother had been born, surrounded by the land that the Harjo family had held onto through allotment and depression, and drought through sheer, quiet stubbornness. She had graduated from Okemah High School in 1971 and gone to work at the county assessor's office, where she had spent 4 years learning property records and tax law with a thoroughness that had impressed the county assessor enough that he had told her, more than once, that she should think about getting a law degree. She was saving for it. She kept a savings passbook in the top drawer of her bedroom dresser, and every 2 weeks she deposited whatever she could spare from her paycheck. She drove a 1969 Chevrolet pickup in a shade of green that was starting to oxidize at the wheel wells. She kept a rosary on the rearview mirror and a CB radio on the dash, standard equipment in rural Oklahoma in 1975, when the highways were full of truckers and the radio chatter was a way of knowing what was happening 2 miles ahead of you. She had a dog named Buster who slept on the porch and barked at raccoons. She sang in the choir at First Baptist and taught Sunday school to the 7-year-olds, who loved her because she brought orange slices and never raised her voice. She had told her mother, in the weeks before she disappeared, that she was thinking about applying to the University of Oklahoma for the following fall. On the evening of August 14, 1975, she left the assessor's office at 5:15 in the afternoon and drove toward home. Her mother had pot roast on the stove. Her father was out checking on the cattle. Her younger brother, Tommy, was in the driveway working on a carburetor when she was supposed to arrive. She never pulled in. By 7 o'clock that evening, Clara Harjo had called the assessor's office, called Anna Mae's 2 closest friends, and called the neighbors whose property sat along the route her daughter typically drove home. No one had seen her. The green pickup was not at any of the places it should have been. By 8, Raymond Harjo had called the Okfuskee County Sheriff's Department. By the following morning, deputies had found the pickup. It was parked, or rather, it had been left, on a stretch of County Road 3480, a packed dirt farm road that cut through scrub oak and red cedar about 4 miles east of Okemah. The driver's door was not fully closed. The CB radio was still on, crackling static. The rosary was still on the mirror. Anna Mae was not in the truck. They found her at 11:14 that morning, in a ravine 30 yards off the road, hidden from the road itself by a stand of cedar and a fold in the earth that made the spot invisible from anywhere a passerby might look. She had been struck multiple times to the head. She had been left there, face down, in red Oklahoma clay that had held the impression of her body through the night. She had been there since the evening before. The investigation moved immediately. A collection of physical evidence was taken from the scene and from the truck, soil samples, hair fibers, and 1 biological sample from beneath Anna Mae's fingernails, skin cells, the technician noted in his report, consistent with a struggle. The sample was collected, processed according to 1975 standards, and stored. At the time, DNA profiling did not exist. The sample was filed. The case moved forward without it. Chief Deputy Leland Cross, a 12-year veteran of the Okfuskee County Sheriff's Department, who had grown up 20 miles outside Okemah, took the lead. He was a methodical man, the kind of investigator who kept handwritten notes in a composition book, and Cross referenced his interviews by date. He interviewed everyone who had been on County Road 3480 in the 48 hours before and after the discovery. He interviewed Anna Mae's co-workers. He interviewed her friends. He interviewed her family and the neighbors whose land adjoined the Harjo property. One name came up twice. A man, a neighbor, someone who had known the Harjo family for years, had been seen by 2 different witnesses on County Road 3480 in the late afternoon of August 14th, within the window of time that Cross calculated for the assault. The man's explanation, when Cross spoke to him, was plausible. He had been checking on a fence line, a routine errand on any cattle operation in that county. He had a calmness about him that Cross would later describe, in his notes, as either innocent or practiced. He could not be sure which. There was no physical evidence that placed the man at the scene in a way Cross could prove. There were no witnesses to the assault itself. The biological sample beneath Anna Mae's fingernails could be tested for blood type. 1975 technology allowed that. But blood type alone was not sufficient to charge a man. The lead went quiet. By 1977, the case had not been closed, but it had gone cold. Cross retired in 1983. The composition notebooks he had kept went into a box in the storage room of the Okfuskee County Sheriff's Department, where they would sit for the next 4 decades. By 1985, 10 years had passed. Tommy Harjo had grown up, married, and was running the family farm. He had taken over from his father, who had never fully recovered from what had happened to Anna Mae, not in any visible, dramatic way, but in the slow, quiet way that grief does its work on a man who doesn't speak about it. Raymond Harjo died in 1989 without having seen anyone charged with his daughter's death. Clara Harjo was still in the house on the 40 acres. She kept a photograph of Anna Mae on the mantel, a church portrait, the kind taken every few years for the directory, with Anna Mae in a blue dress and the particular self-conscious smile of a young woman who is not entirely comfortable having her picture taken. Clara kept it dusted. She kept it lit by the lamp beside it. She told her grandchildren who it was. By 1995, 20 years had passed. The man whose name had appeared twice in Leland Cross's composition notebooks was in his 50s. He had become, if anything, more visible in the community, a deacon in his church, the kind of man whose opinion was sought at county commission meetings, whose handshake meant something in a deal involving land or livestock. He had a wife, children, grandchildren. He coached youth sports. He was, by every visible measure, exactly what he appeared to be. If he thought about Anna Mae Harjo, no one who knew him would have known it. By 2005, the DNA Identification Act and the expansion of CODIS, the National Database of DNA Profiles, had transformed cold case investigation across the country. The Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation had begun a systematic review of pre-DNA biological evidence in unsolved homicides, prioritizing cases where samples had been properly collected and stored. The Harjo case was on that list. The sample from beneath Anna Mae's fingernails was retrieved from storage, assessed, and found to contain sufficient cellular material for modern extraction. A DNA profile was generated. It was entered into CODIS. No match came back. The man whose cells were in that profile was not in the criminal database. He had never been arrested. He had no record that would have generated a DNA sample. The profile sat in the database, a complete, accurate genetic signature of the man who had killed Anna Mae Harjo, and found nothing to match against. The case stayed cold. Every case on this channel represents weeks of digging through records, verifying facts, and piecing together real lives that were lost. If you want us to keep uncovering the truth behind stories like this one, take a second to like this video and subscribe, and drop a comment letting us know where in the world you're watching from. Your support is what makes this possible. Now let's get back to Anna Mae. Forensic genealogy, the technique that uses publicly accessible ancestry databases to trace the relatives of an unknown DNA profile and work backward to identify a potential source, had been used in high-profile cases since 2018, when it identified the Golden State Killer. But the technology and the legal frameworks surrounding its use had been slow to reach smaller jurisdictions with older cold cases and fewer investigative resources. In the fall of 2022, the Oklahoma Attorney General's Office launched a cold case initiative specifically targeting pre-CODIS biological evidence in Native American victim cases, a category of homicide that federal reporting data had long identified as critically under-investigated. The Harjo case was flagged. The DNA profile generated in 2005 was submitted to a forensic genealogy lab in Tulsa. The genealogist assigned to the case was a woman named Dana Whitfield. She had worked similar cases in Texas and Kansas. She uploaded the profile to GeneMatch, a public ancestry database that allows users to upload their own genetic data and compare it against other submissions. The process works by identifying partial matches, distant relatives who share segments of DNA with the unknown profile, and building a family tree outward from those matches until the branches narrow toward a single individual who fits the age, sex, and geographic profile of the person being sought. It took 11 months. On a Tuesday morning in March 2023, Dana Whitfield was reviewing a new set of matches that had populated overnight. She cross-referenced one branch of the tree she had been building against Oklahoma property records and the Okfuskee County voter rolls from the 1970s. She narrowed the geographic scope. She compared the result against the age range her profile indicated, male, likely between his mid-20s and mid-30s in 1975, which would place his birth year between roughly 1940 and 1950. One name kept appearing at the intersection of every filter she applied. She picked up the phone and called the lead investigator at the Attorney General's office. "I need you to run a name," she said. She gave it to him. She said, "And I need you to tell me if he's still alive." He was. He was 81 years old. He still lived in Okfuskee County. He was still, as far as anyone in that community knew, a respected man. Investigators from the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation established surveillance before they made contact. They needed a confirming DNA sample, something collected without the subject's knowledge that could be compared against the 1975 profile before an arrest. Standard procedure in genealogy led investigations. And critical, the genealogy analysis narrows the field, but a direct comparison closes it. They collected his discarded coffee cup from a gas station where he stopped most mornings. They sent it to the Osby laboratory. The analysis took 6 days. The DNA matched. The profile extracted from beneath Anna Mae Harjo's fingernails on August 15, 1975. Cells from a struggle, from a moment when she had fought back against the man killing her. Matched the DNA of an 81-year-old man who had been attending church in Okemah, Oklahoma, every Sunday for going on 6 decades. He was arrested on the morning of June 7, 2024, at his home. Osby agents and Okfuskee County deputies served the warrant at 7 a.m. Neighbors who happened to be outside. A woman walking her dog, a man checking his mail, watched from across the street as the man they had known their entire lives was led to a patrol vehicle in handcuffs. The phones in Okemah started ringing within the hour. For most people in that community, the name attached to the arrest was one they associated with deacon boards and cattle auctions, and the particular kind of civic reliability that small towns extend to the people who have been present for long enough. The idea that this man, that he had been living among them, that they had broken bread with him, that their children had played with his grandchildren, was almost impossible to hold. "I've known him 40 years, one longtime resident told a reporter from the Okemah News Leader. "I don't know what to do with this." The Creek Nation of Oklahoma issued a statement expressing support for Anna Mae Harjo's family and calling for full accountability. The Harjo family, through an attorney, said they were grateful and that they had never stopped believing this day would come. The defendant was charged with first-degree murder. Given his age and health, his attorneys entered a motion challenging his fitness to stand trial. That motion was denied. Proceedings were ongoing as of the time this video was produced. Tommy Harjo was still farming the 40 acres outside of Okemah when the call came. He had inherited the land from his parents, the way Harjo land had always passed, not through attorneys or documents, but through the simple understanding that this ground belonged to this family and always would. He had spent his life on it. He had raised his children on it. He had watched the photograph of his sister on his mother's mantle and said nothing about it that wasn't already said by the keeping of it. When investigators called him with the news of the arrest, he was in the barn. He stood there for a while after he hung up. He has said, in the time since, that he did not feel what he expected to feel. He expected anger. What he felt instead, at first, was something closer to exhaustion, the particular relief of a weight that you have been carrying for so long that you stopped noticing it was there. She deserved better than 49 years, he said in a statement released through the family's attorney. But she deserved the truth too. And now she has it. The case of Anna Mae Harjo has become one of the clearest examples of what forensic genealogy, combined with proper long-term evidence preservation, can accomplish in cases that the technology of their era was unable to solve. The biological sample collected in 1975 by a technician who had no way of knowing what it would one day be able to say. That sample, stored properly and transferred through 4 decades of evidence management, became the thing that spoke for a woman who could no longer speak for herself. There is a broader accounting that this case is part of, and it should be said plainly. Missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, Ndublik, represent one of the most underreported and underinvestigated categories of violent crime in the United States. Federal data has consistently shown that homicide is one of the leading causes of death for Native American women. Conviction rates in those cases are significantly lower than comparable cases involving non-Native victims. The reasons are multiple: jurisdictional complexity between tribal, federal, and state law enforcement, underfunding of tribal law enforcement, historical mistrust between Native communities and state agencies, and a pattern of institutional indifference that stretches back decades. Anna Mae Harjo's case was solved. Not every case like hers has been, or will be. What it required was preserved evidence, a state initiative specifically designed to revisit this category of case, a genealogist with the skill and patience to follow 11 months of genetic data to a name, and a family that never stopped being present in whatever institutional record would listen to them. What would you have done differently if you had been in that community and a man you trusted had been hiding something like this for 50 years? And what does it say about the systems we build, the evidence rooms, the databases, the forensic techniques we fund and the ones we don't, that the difference between justice and silence can be a paper envelope in a storage facility that someone, somewhere, made the decision to keep? Leave your thoughts in the comments. This case deserves the conversation, and I read everything you write. Anna Mae Harjo was 22 years old. She drove a green pickup with a rosary on the mirror and a CB radio on the dash. She sang in the choir. She taught Sunday school to the 7-year-olds, who loved her because she brought orange slices. She was saving money in a passbook for a law degree. She had a plan. She never pulled into that driveway on August 14, 1975. But 49 years later, the cells beneath her fingernails, from the moment she fought back, from the last seconds when she refused to be passive about what was happening to her, carried her killer's name out of a paper envelope and into a courtroom in Okfuskee County, Oklahoma. She had been trying to tell someone for a long time. Justice found Anna Mae Harjo after 49 years. Stories like hers, where evidence was preserved and families refused to disappear and the science eventually caught up to the truth, are why this channel exists. If you believe that truth is worth pursuing no matter how long it takes, subscribe so you don't miss the next case. More are waiting in the description below. Thank you for being here.